Yes, it is objectively cheaper to run Macs, and even though you think you do, you don't own your media. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by Incogni. Don't let companies exploit your personal information. Visit incogni.com/MacVoices and find out how to protect yourself. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it's MacVoices Live, Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, whatever time that is, wherever you are. We are in the chat room at youtube.com/MacVoicesTV, where you can be actually seeing us, too, if you are live with us. And if not, don't worry, you'll hear from us later as these shows get edited and dropped into the MacVoices feeds. We do this every Tuesday, so if you forgot to do it tonight, or as you're listening to this, the next Tuesday coming up, we're bound to be here too. A number of things we want to talk about tonight, so we're just going to dig in and get to it, introduce the panel, and then we'll roll. So as usual, David Ginsburg is up in the top of my screen at the top left. David, good to have you as always.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me, Chuck. It's, yes, always looking forward to a Tuesday night and having some fun chatting about all kinds of things happening. Seems like it's never a dull moment each week.
Yeah, we do have sometimes slow weeks, but we never have a dull week.
Yeah.
So, and if it is, we make it up anyway as we go.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of making it up, Jim Ray is here with a. Yeah, I don't know what that means either, Jim. Apparently an infinite loop background this time around.
Are we having a dull moment?
Well, no, unless you just stare at the camera.
Good to see everyone.
Good to see you as well. Eric Bolden is here. This time, we don't have any flowers or birds or anything. We have a tree.
It's not just any tree.
What is that thing?
This is the newest bird home high-end rental unit out in the woods. Natural made, it has rain protection at the door. It doesn't get any better than this. They're going to be doing
tree B&B.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's literal Airbnb.
Oh, yeah. Extra fancy.
Did you create that, or is that something that?
No, it was out there. It's out in the woods. This is from yesterday.
Wow. Okay.
I was really impressed. I don't know who came up with it, but yeah, it's good.
Is that man-made?
No.
Woman-made.
I think there's a bird that kind of worked on the opening a bit, but it was just out there. I was very impressed. We'll see if
looks like a UFO.
Yeah. So after the show, folks, you can find Eric wandering in the woods looking for things like this. Jeff Gamet is here. He's not wandering in the woods. He's right here with us where he should be. Jeff, good to have you.
It's great to get to hang out with you, Chuck. I have a question for you. Since for whatever reason I cannot post in the in the live chat on YouTube, I couldn't make a comment there. But I'm curious, what do you mean by we tried to get Al Roker but ended up with Dave and Jeff?
It meant that we ended up with you two talking weather.
Good save.
That's what it was intended. Yeah, that's.
Oh, okay.
Pre-show, you and Dave were talking about how you had to turn your air conditioning on, and Dave said the heat wave's coming his way, and then Barry said something.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I was ready to go pick up Dave, and we were going to swing by your place and have a little chat.
No, I have not lost it completely.
Okay.
I have not lost it completely. Ben Roethig is here, and he hasn't lost it completely either. Or maybe he has since he showed up for this. I'm not sure. Ben, good to have you.
It's good to be here, Chuck.
Sure it is, Ben. Sure it is. Last but absolutely not least, with another one of his trademark backgrounds, Mr. Mark Fuccio. Mark, great to have you. This time you're quoting Dwight D. Eisenhower, I believe.
Yes. Hello, Chuck, and chat room and fellow panel members. I was listening to a podcast this morning while walking a dog, and somebody quoted something Dwight Diaz and Howard said, where he said, intellectual is a man who uses more words than necessary to tell you more than he knows, and it really stood out, and I remembered it for this afternoon when I was scratching my head trying to figure out what sort of background I should use, and nothing came up based on the stories that we might be discussing tonight, but I remember this quote, and here it is.
I feel seen.
Okay. Well, the first thing on my agenda tonight is kind of an obvious one, I think, but I do think that we should talk about it. Dave, I'm not sure if you, Ben, or who put this in the chat, although in the Slack chat.
I did,
but I had it on my radar too. Ben, you want to summarize this, because it's sort of something that we all already know, and frequently preach here on MacVoices.
Okay. Essentially, the University of Kentucky. Yes, this is a good one for all you Wildcats out there. Essentially, they found out why the initial buy price on Apple hardware was higher. The cost to run that hardware turned out to be significantly cheaper because of efficiencies and uptime. Of course, Dave would be able to explain the ins and outs of this better than I would, but I found it really interesting.
Dave, I'm anxious to hear your take on this particular story, because we've had these stories before about educational institutions. I know you've made the point plenty of times here about various large companies that you wouldn't think would have large Mac installations, and in fact they do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I've talked about it a bunch of times. And I mean, Jamf is the company that pretty much brought up that because of them being their bigger clients, IBM, SAP, Starbucks, Walmart, many of these large corporations. But they go and analyze, what's the ROI on a Mac, the return on investment. Well, it's astronomical. I mean, not only is it the fact that they have good resale value, they have good support. They have less as long as your environment's in a good place, where some companies are not with Macs. But you definitely find the fact that a Mac is going to work pretty good, gosh darn good in the environment, assuming you've got that flexibility. In most cases, Mac support calls are so much less of a prevalence than a PC call, because there's bounds, and I see it every day with support calls on the Windows side of things. But on the Mac side of things, it's a rarity that you'll see something other than it's the company's doing, something they might have set up that isn't friendly to a Mac. But those big corporations I mentioned tend to have tens of thousands of Macs in their environment, so they must be doing something right, because they can keep them supported and have very little of any issue. And you find employees are much happier to have a Mac over a PC, only because they find it work better, and it's efficient, and they can get their job done, in most cases.
And look, before somebody says it, I know we're all Apple fanboys.
Right.
But I also like to think that we can be objective. And when something else works from another vendor or another platform, we acknowledge it. And it's just, this is one of those things that we see constantly. People push back on, gee, those Macs are expensive. But then once they're purchased, you hardly ever hear from anyone again, unless it's a legitimate, honest-to-God problem. That isn't to say it's not possible to have a legitimate, honest-to-God problem. But it just seems so much rarer, and there seem to be so, even with the way we all talk about some of the recent Mac OS upgrades, you'd think there were always a lot of problems. I know an awful lot of people that just, they don't do everything and don't tweak their systems the way we do, and so they never even notice some of the issues that we see as large.
Well, I'll also go back and say, a Windows machine can be very inefficient. Intel processors don't do a very good job of managing processing speeds and then the CPU cycles. Memory management is just can be very horrible, especially in the Windows. Windows is not a very good job of managing it. But you also have applications, particular applications. Any companies have applications that probably could be resource hogs. They weren't written properly. They tend to not. They cut down on battery life on laptops. The machines are very slow. I'm not going to say Macs are perfect either, but I tend to not see that issue of what I just described on a Mac when they do versus a PC, only because of that reason. I think apps are a little differently developed. I mean, Jim can speak on development side of things. I don't know, he doesn't develop on Windows, I don't think, but that there are developers out there with the applications that just tend to not be very good when it comes to that.
Jim, you want to jump in with any thoughts?
I have developed, excuse me, in Windows in the past. It was pretty awful, but that was a while ago. So that was basically Win32. So I'm not sure what it's like now. They have different tools, but my guess is it's still probably a lot worse.
Yeah.
But I don't know. On this topic, I kind of thought like, it seems like bouncing the rubble. Like, is anybody really arguing that people shouldn't use Macs and Enterprise? That seems like that. Yeah.
Plenty of companies out there that don't.
Oh yes, you'd be very surprised within the IT community.
Yeah,
I am surprised.
There's a thing in the IT community where people go out and they get all these Microsoft certifications. Well, the Microsoft certifications tell you that you do everything with Microsoft products, which means PCs. And that's what you know. But then also that extends on to, do you want job security? Then you need to make sure that that your company has products that you are required to be there to offer support. And this is a thing that I saw come up. Now, granted, this was years ago, back when I was in the consulting space, but it was part of that community, that IT community, where that was a thing. You didn't want Macs in there because they weren't part of the Microsoft certifications you had, and you needed to have stuff there that required your support. And I would occasionally come into companies where I'd be an outside consultant hired to coordinate with the IT department to handle the one department that they begrudgingly allowed Macs into.
So that wouldn't surprise me in 2005 or 2015, but we're almost in 2024. You don't think that's changed a lot? I mean, I'm not saying obviously there's going to be holdouts, but isn't there an awful lot more of at Apple? I mean, the iPhone kind of led the wedge, and and the flip side is people that are IT people that don't want Macs. They're not going to give a rat's patootie about this study either.
No, of course they won't.
No.
They just laugh it off.
But to be perfectly honest, working in a corporate environment, I've heard a lot of basically early 2000s era talking points from IT within a couple years.
And Jim, your point is fair. I think it has gotten better, but it is still very, very prevalent. And you because I've talked to enough corporate IT people, I'll just say within the last 24 months. And it's always like, oh, you're an Apple guy, you're a Mac guy. And it's not a compliment coming out of their mouths. Right. So it's I'm an annoyance, because they either don't understand them, don't want to understand them, or if I really want to dig down, I have to wonder, do they believe that they're a threat of some kind, as Jeff was alluding to their job? So I feel like it's important that we bring, we bring some of these articles up, and folks, if check the show notes, read the article, judge for yourself. If you're in that space, maybe just be informed. Eric, you had a point, and then Mark, I think you're after that.
The consistency of the hardware, I think, makes a huge difference. If you order a MacBook Air and then you order another MacBook Air, they behave the same. Put software on it, you don't have to worry about, this shipment, it's got one video card, the other shipment has a slightly different video card and a different network card. It's all the same. And that makes a huge difference. Same with the iPads. It behaves the same, behaves like a phone. There's consistency from device to device. It's not an Android from one vendor, an Android device from another vendor, where there's slight differences, and then you have to test everything in each one of those situations. I think that makes it a positive difference as well.
Mark, do you have something that you hope will wrap this discussion up?
Yeah, 2 or maybe 2.5 points. I guess the first one is, we've discussed this before, a year, 18 months, 24 months ago, when there was an IBM study that had similar type of findings that, despite the maybe higher initial capital outlay, that over the long-term over life of the product, has a much lower IT support costs, because Macs don't suddenly forget how to print like Windows machines, seem to have a common problem doing. And then the second thing, I think, sort of addressing points both Jim and Ben are making, is that, yes, corporate culture is very slow to change, but I know from my own first experience almost 20 years ago, when we first launched the Drobo product, we went to Microsoft Developers Conference, and all sorts of people came by, and they're really very interested, and we kept getting these questions of, when are you going to have a add FireWire to the Drobo? And after hearing this about 10 times, I started asking the guys, well, this is a Windows show, FireWire is for Macs. Why do you ask? And then this common refrain was, oh, well, at home I use a Mac. I have to use Windows during my J job, but at home I use a Mac. So, I think there is this dichotomy out there, and for better or worse, corporations are slow to act, and if you believe some of the rumors, some of them are still dependent on software that was built on Internet Explorer version 6. So, it's a very diverse world and environment out there. And when I was at Drobo, I had one customer who bought iMacs because they were beautiful hardware, and he would load at that time he would load up Windows 7 on them. So he wouldn't even bother to use Parallels. He would just just load Windows 7 on them, because it was much better hardware reliability. So it's a crazy world out there.
I'm going to give the last word to the chat room, because Steve says PC techs love the certification badges after the names. Get a couple of Mac certs too. Yeah, good point, Steve. And Barry says the IT department where he's employed is overtly anti-Apple. So it is still out there. And, I don't know that we need to make it a holy crusade or anything like that, but it just be informed, and be able to talk intelligently if and when you are called upon to defend your choice, because it should be your choice. What difference does it make if I use a Bic pen or a Cross pen, if I can get the job done?
Oh, Chuck, we could talk for hours.
Oh, shoot, I forgot you were here, Jeff. I'm sorry. Yes, I know that.
No pens.
No,
Seriously, Chuck, stone knives and bear skins.
Again, you need to go back and talk about fountain pens and goose quill pens. So
man.
Yeah, it's a crazy world out there.
Time machine time. This edition of MacVoices is supported by Incogni. Don't let companies exploit your personal information. Visit incogni.com/MacVoices and find out how to protect yourself. The holiday season is here, and you're probably doing much, maybe all of your holiday shopping online. That means you may be giving a great big present to the Grinch in the room, your personal data. All that information is being aggregated by data brokers behind the scenes, information like your name, social security number, login credentials, online activities like shopping, and more. You can help spoil their plans by using Incogni. Incogni reaches out to data brokers on your behalf, requests your personal data removal, and deals with any objections from the other side. Since many data brokers collect your personal information again after some time, Incogni also takes care that your data stays off the market by conducting repeated, ongoing removals. Do it right now. Won't take 10 minutes. Visit incogni.com/MacVoices. Create an account and tell them whose personal data they'll be removing. Also, grant them the right to work for you, of course. Incogni will then contact data brokers on your behalf and request your personal data removal. Finally, kick back with some eggnog and let them do the work. They handle any objections from data brokers and keep you updated on their progress every step of the way. Get your exclusive Incogni deal at incogni.com/MacVoices. It's risk-free with Incogni's 30-day money-back guarantee. Don't let your data be someone else's holiday present. Get Incogni at incogni.com/MacVoices. Thanks to Incogni for supporting MacVoices. This one, I'm not quite sure if this is a warning or exactly what this is, but I think it's important maybe to remind folks that if you are quote-unquote buying media off of some websites or some services, that really what it amounts to is you're buying a license to watch it on that service. You're not buying the media itself, and therefore you don't own it. And in the case of what was in the article, you can have that right taken away because somebody loses a license or the licenses change or they weren't written properly in the first place. And so even though you've paid it, you may not be entitled to a refund and you may not have access to that content.
I haven't read the piece. Is this about the PS5 movie thing?
Yep.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So the conclusion of the article is, if you really want to own it, buy the physical media, which seems
even then you don't own it.
Well,
you still you're buying a physical license. The license just has to be in the shape. It's like a little disc that fits into a slot that you don't have on your computer anymore.
But at least you have the option. I mean, okay, your point's well taken, Jeff.
I have a bookshelf full of VHS tapes that says physical media ain't forever.
So I mean,
so Jim, do you still have a VHS player?
I don't know that I have one that would not just eat the tape.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, I hear absolutely what you're saying, and the solution, at least in my mind, or one that will probably last for most of our lifetimes, is get the license with the physical media, then rip it to digital, and then back up the daylights out of it. And hopefully, with a little luck, in a format that you will be able to play for a long, long time, or at least as long as you'll ever care to.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really only for something that I think that's really precious. You talk about video, that's expensive. It's big. It's not free to store.
Storage is
it's
cheap.
not that cheap compared to large amounts of video content.
No, it still is. It still is.
Jim, all I can say is I guess it depends on how much you care. How much you care.
That's
about,
what I said.
Yeah, whatever it is.
I mean, if it's some movie, if it's my favorite movie in my life, then yeah. But it's just some random movie. Oh well. I mean, not that people, I don't approve of them, taking away stuff that you bought, digitally. That's not a good thing. But it's just, nothing's forever. So,
Yeah.
But Jim, an 18 terabyte hard drive, USB 3 is $288. I mean, that's that can store. I think the technical term is a metric ass load of video. So it. Yes.
Well, it's not really that much video.
Yes, it is. That's an enormous amount of video. I mean, an hour's worth of video is sort of an MP4 is going to be about depending on encoding and resolution, anywhere from maybe 500 megabytes to 1.5 gigabytes. So,
plus that's not a backup. You got to get two of them and have one in another location.
Okay. Well, okay. So you're perfecting the argument, but still,
we're talking forever. So
okay, yes, we're talking forever, but still, that's a lot better than paying whatever. I think the article said quoted somebody who paid $30 for for a video, and then it just vanished in smoke. So that's $30 on top of a subscription cost. Do that. Just do the math. 10 videos, for 10 videos, you'll amortize, the cost of the 18 terabyte drive. 20 videos, you have, its own backup, so, the economics of storing your own video is very, 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 very affordable.
Well, how many people buy 20, videos on online services? Is that common?
I have a ton of movies that I have bought through Apple, some through Amazon, I think some through Google as well. I have to quote Mark, I have a metric buttload of movies that I've bought digitally.
And think about how many movies we all purchased when we were getting away from physical media and buying them online before the streaming services became what they are now.
I didn't do that.
Then maybe you're one of the lucky ones. I don't know.
I bought a bunch.
Yeah.
I guess it's part of the reason, because it didn't really feel like owning something,
So Jim, just tell us a little bit, how do you consume media, and is it something you view as disposable, or is it something you want to own and be able to go back to and review?
Well, I would say that that's kind of changed over my life. So I have a huge collection of physical books and DVDs and VHS tapes, but I don't really go back and use those anymore. I don't really want to get rid of them, but it's kind of an albatross at this point. And it's, so at this point I mostly just stream stuff, and, it would have to be something that was just like really like, to say, well, I got to own it at this point, because it's just so convenient. Like, wherever I am, I don't have to, physical stuff, you can break, you can lose it. It's just not where, you are. So, it's like mostly I consume stuff like on my iPad or Apple TV, and physical media just doesn't really work with that. So, and talking about ripping, I've done some ripping of DVDs. That's a major pain, to do it in the first place, and then to keep track of it. And
Jim, okay, so this one doesn't affect you, and I respect what you're saying, and I think
I'm strongly think what what Sony has done. It's wrong. This is bad. It's wrong. But it's just I'm really putting up sort of a straw man of saying physical media isn't really forever either. So to say but it should be my choice. Like, if I want to be really careful with my physical media and, make sure that I don't lose it, and that, I always have a working device, that's up to me. If Sony decides to do this, that's not up to me. And, that sucks. So I'm heartily against that.
Yeah. First of all, I want to welcome Web Bixby. Web, good to see you. I'm glad you were able to make it.
Jim's right. I agree with him all the way.
What? You weren't even here for what he was saying.
That doesn't matter.
Proxy.
Web, I think I'm very afraid now.
Oh.
Ben, you have a point.
Yeah. Here's the thing. The PlayStation Video Store is, quite frankly, not a very big marketplace for video content. The same thing with its Microsoft equivalent, which was also dropped. But is Warner Brothers Discovery going to not renew their licenses with Google or Apple, or who they have valued financial partnerships just to get people on Macs? It just seems like in this case there wasn't really a fit anymore for that content. I think it's going to be a lot safer be Apple TV now, but the old iTunes or or Amazon or the larger players.
Listen, I think you're right. You're safer with the larger players, but that doesn't mean that those larger players can't fall from grace or fall a lot farther than just from grace. So, it's, and how much money, I mean, Jeff, I'm not going to ask you how much money you invested in those purchases, but I would imagine it's something that you'd prefer not to lose. And
right.
Yeah. And
in some cases, it's because it was actually cheaper to buy the movie for streaming than it was to rent it or get a DVD or Blu-ray. So so I do have some movies that I paid for that I consider disposable, but for the most part, yeah, I would be really pissed off if I lost my my movie collection.
Eric?
Physical media is really nice, especially for the science fiction people that watch Star Wars and Star Trek and so on. When you want to go back to an episode and you want to make sure that it didn't get edited to fit within the chunk of time available for broadcast TV, where some chunk was cut out, where you didn't have a director who said, really, I can redo this. This isn't my vision. Han should never have shot first, but you want to see the original. So it's physical media is helpful then. A streaming service might not give you the version you want. Also, just of note, used bookstores are great places to get DVDs and Blu-ray at a much lower cost than the original retail.
And I agree with you. I'm thinking about the way that some of the old cartoons got edited. This is no longer politically.
Yep.
Therefore, it should not be shown. Therefore, and that just feels like revisionist history that it just goes so wrong. Mark, I'll give you the last point, then we'll move on.
Yeah, I think depending on how widespread this becomes, it might trigger off, another, round of piracy. I can easily see people justifying to themselves, well, I bought this thing and I'm going to go and download via my favorite BitTorrent site. I'm going to download a copy so I own it, so that in the event, that, the company I bought it from, takes the license back, I still have a version in my library forever. So I think, these are seemingly heavy-handed tactics, and there's all sorts of technological remedies out there that empower consumers to go out and, say "f you" back to the companies that they think are abusing them. So we'll have to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I wish it wasn't the case, but it is there. And so if you are out there and you're depending on one of these services to preserve your absolute favorite movie or two or TV show or whatever, maybe take a look at what your alternatives are. And we're certainly not advocating any piracy alternatives, but any alternatives that you think are appropriate and protect your investment. Next time on MacVoices, the panel talks about why you should check your Plex server settings and why you should be wary of QR codes. I'm Chuck Joyner. I'll see you next time on MacVoices. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices each month. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.